She didn't even warn me it was coming. After the 8 years I spent saying yes when I wanted to say no, after the missed holidays with my own friends, after the sleepless nights co-signing documents I barely had time to read because I trusted them, my mother sent me a text at 11:47 on a Tuesday morning while I was eating lunch at my desk. We've decided to move forward with Marcus as sole owner of the business. We think it's best for everyone if you step back. You've always had your own career anyway. That was it. No call, no conversation, no thank you for the last 8 years of your life. Just a paragraph that read like a memo from HR, delivered by the woman who used to braid my hair on Sunday mornings. My name is Claire Hartwell, and if you're watching this from wherever you are right now, stay with me for a little while, because what happened next is something I need you to understand, not so you'll feel sorry for me, but so you'll recognize the moment when your own family mistakes your patience for powerlessness. I was 22 when my father's bakery started failing. Not because he wasn't talented, my father could make a croissant that would make you reconsider your entire life, but because he had the financial history of someone who'd never met a credit score he couldn't destroy. 3 maxed cards, a foreclosure from the early 2000s, and a string of unpaid medical bills that followed him like a shadow. He wanted to expand. He'd found a commercial space in a growing part of town, a corner unit with big windows and exposed brick, the kind of place that looks like it was designed specifically to go on Instagram. The rent was manageable. The equipment loan was not with his credit. So, he called me. I was the responsible one. The one who'd gone to school on partial scholarship, worked 2 jobs, and graduated with almost nothing in debt. I had a good score, a real job in hospital administration, and apparently, a face that was very easy to ask things of. My brother Marcus had been coasting since high school, odd jobs, a failed food truck, 3 semesters of community college. But Marcus was funny and charming, and he and my father had the same laugh. And I think in our family that always counted for more than reliability. When my father called and asked me to co-sign the equipment loan and be listed on the business registration because he needed a name with clean credit on the paperwork, I said yes. Of course, I said yes. He said it was just administrative. He said the business would be his and Marcus's, they'd do the work, and I'd just be a name on a document. He said he'd refinance within 2 years and get my name off everything. That was 8 years ago. He never refinanced. And it turned out the business structure he'd filed, the one I'd signed without reading, because I was 22 and exhausted and just wanted my father to look at me the way he looked at Marcus, had listed me as the primary member of the LLC with a 60% ownership stake. Because the attorney they'd used at the time had structured it based on who held the majority financial responsibility, which was me. I didn't know that. Not until the Tuesday my mother sent that text. Not until I went digging. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For 8 years, I showed up. Not in the bakery. I had my own career, my own apartment across town, my own life. I was quietly assembling piece by piece. But I showed up in every way that didn't get photographed or celebrated. When the equipment loan had a bad quarter and my father couldn't cover the minimum, he called me. When they needed a second business credit card to bridge a cash flow gap, they put it in my name. When the landlord wanted a personal guarantee on the commercial lease renewal, my father said they needed someone with income documentation and passed the phone to me. I signed. Every time. Because every time, there was a version of the story where my father looked at me with something other than mild surprise that I existed, and I kept chasing that version. My mother wasn't cruel, not in the obvious way. She just had a gift for making you feel like the things you did for this family were simply the natural order of things, the way oxygen exists in a room. No one thanks you for breathing. No one notices until you leave. She'd say things like, you've always been the sensible one, the way other people say you've always had such a plain face, technically a neutral observation, delivered like it cost her nothing, landing like something else entirely. Marcus, meanwhile, had found his footing at the bakery somewhere around year 4. He started showing up consistently, learned the morning prep routine, got good at talking to customers. My father loved him for it, posted about him on the bakery's social media, started referring to the business as Marcus's place at family dinners while I sat across the table, having signed for the equipment that made every croissant in that kitchen possible. I didn't say anything. I smiled. I asked about his new sourdough recipe. I was 30 years old and still auditioning for a seat at a table I'd been paying for. Then came the Tuesday text. I read it 3 times. Then I set my phone face down on my desk, finished my lunch, and did not cry. I want you to understand that I did not cry. Something shifted instead. Not anger exactly. More like clarity, the way a room looks different after someone finally opens a window that's been painted shut for years. I typed back 2 words. Understood. Thanks. Not because I had accepted it, because I had just decided what I was going to do instead. That night I went home and pulled out every document I had ever signed with my father's name on it. I had kept them all not out of suspicion, just because I am the kind of person who keeps things in labeled folders, which is apparently also the kind of person whose family will happily hand over to a brother who can barely keep track of his own keys. I spread everything across my kitchen table, made a pot of coffee, and started reading. The equipment loan, the lease guarantees, the business credit card agreements, the LLC operating agreement. I almost missed it the first time. It was buried in Section 4, subsection C, in the kind of language that is specifically designed to make your eyes slide off it. In the event of majority member designation by financial contribution and liability assumption, said member shall retain 60% voting interest and controlling authority over business decisions, asset disposition, and ownership transfer. 60%. I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling for a long time. My father had needed my name on that LLC because no one would give his business the time of day without it. The attorney had structured it the way attorneys structure things when they're looking at who's actually on the hook, and that was me. My father had probably never read Section 4. He'd probably shaken hands with his lawyer, signed where he was told to sign, and gone home thinking it was just paperwork. It was not just paperwork. I wasn't just a name on a document. I owned the majority of the business he had just tried to hand to my brother. I sat with that for 3 days. I didn't call my parents. I didn't call Marcus. I called a business attorney, a woman named Dana Kowalski, who a colleague had recommended when she was dealing with her own partnership dispute. I told her the whole story over the phone, and when I finished, there was a pause, and then she said, very calmly, "Claire, you have significantly more leverage here than you probably realize." I asked her what I could do. She told me. I didn't act immediately. That was the part that surprised, even me. Instead, I asked Dana to send me a full assessment, and then I closed my laptop, went for a long walk, and thought about whether I actually wanted to do this. Whether there was a version of this where I called my mother back, and we had a conversation, a real one, and she said, "You're right. We should have included you. We're sorry," and I believed her. I thought about that version for about 40 minutes. Then I thought about the business credit card in my name that my father had been running supplies through for 3 years without once asking if that was okay. The late payments I'd caught on my own credit report and quietly corrected without saying anything because I didn't want to make things awkward. My 31st birthday, when I called the bakery to see if anyone wanted to grab dinner, and my mother said my father and Marcus were doing a catering job and she was tired. I went home and opened my laptop. What I did first was quiet. No dramatic letters, no confrontations. I simply requested an updated copy of the LLC records from the state, verified my ownership stake in writing, and had Dana send a formal notice of member inquiry to the registered business address, meaning my parents' house, since that was still listed as the business office of record. It was not threatening. It was, in legal terms, simply a member exercising her right to review business records and financial accounts. The notice arrived on a Thursday. By Friday morning, my phone was ringing. My father called first. I watched it ring. Then my mother. Then Marcus. Then my father again. I let them all go to voicemail, poured myself a glass of sparkling water, and stood by my apartment window watching the street below. My brother left a voicemail that lasted 4 minutes. He started with, "Claire, what is going on?" and ended with, "Dad is really upset, and I think you need to think about what you're doing to this family." There was a part in the middle where he said, "You know, this business is his whole life," and I almost picked up the phone then. Almost. Instead, I listened to the voicemail twice, set my phone down, and went to bed. My mother called again Saturday morning. This time, I answered. "Claire, Her voice had that particular quality she only used when she needed something soft, slightly wounded, designed to make you feel like you had already done something wrong before the conversation even started. What is this letter from an attorney? It's a member inquiry notice, Mom. I'm requesting access to the business financial records. Why would you do that? You've never been involved in the day-to-day. I've been involved in every loan, every lease, and every line of credit for 8 years, I said. My name is on 60% of that LLC. That makes me involved. Silence. Your father is beside himself, she said finally. I know. He built that business. With my credit score and my signature, I said. I'm not arguing about who baked the bread, Mom. I'm asking to see the books. She tried a few more angles. The family angle, we don't do things this way. The ingratitude angle, after everything we've done for you. The Marcus angle, he has a family to think about now. Claire, he needs this. I let her finish. Then I said, I'll have Dana reach out to your attorney to schedule a time to review the records. I hope you have a good weekend. I hung up before she could respond. What I felt in that moment was not triumph. I want to be clear about that. It felt more like the first deep breath after a long time underwater. Like something in my chest had been held at tension for years and had finally, quietly, released. What I was not prepared for was what the records actually showed. Dana got access to the business financials within 2 weeks. My rights as majority member made refusal legally untenable, and their attorney knew it. When she sent me the summary with a note that said, call me before you read this, I should have known. I called her. She walked me through it. For the past 3 years, Marcus had been running personal expenses through the business account. Not small amounts. A truck. Vacation travel booked as supplier meetings. Thousands of dollars of personal groceries categorized as product development. Most significantly, a renovation on his personal home that had been billed as a commercial kitchen upgrade for the bakery, which was still operating out of its original space. Total discrepancy over 3 years, somewhere north of $40,000. All of it running through a business that bore my name. I sat at my kitchen table after I hung up with Dana and stared at the wall for a long time. Not out of anger, though I felt that too, but because I was doing the math on what that meant for me. Because if the IRS ever looked at those books, my name was the one at the top of the LLC registration. My name was the one on the business credit accounts. They hadn't just pushed me out of a business I owned. They had been quietly using my identity to run a side fund for my brother's personal life, while telling me in a Tuesday morning text that they decided to move forward without me. I told Dana, do everything. The formal notice went out on a Wednesday. Certified mail. Intentional, so they'd have to sign for it. It outlined my controlling interest, identified the financial discrepancies, and stated that effective immediately, I was exercising my authority as majority member to suspend all business account activity, pending a formal financial review. It also noted that any attempt to transfer assets, liquidate inventory, or encumber the business in any way without my written consent would constitute a legal violation. I did not mail it dramatically. I dropped it at the post office on my way to the gym, went and did my workout, came home, made dinner, and watched 2 episodes of something I don't even remember. Because the thing about finally deciding to act is that once the decision is made, the peace comes before the storm does. I already knew what I'd done. I just had to wait for them to open the envelope. They opened it on Friday. My father called 11 times between Friday evening and Sunday morning. I listened to every single voicemail. I needed to hear them, not because they gave me any new information, but because I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. The first few voicemails were angry. How dare you? That kind of energy. My father's voice at high volume, familiar from childhood, the kind of sound that used to make me make myself very small and very agreeable. I noticed that it didn't do that anymore. The later voicemails were scared. You could hear it underneath the indignation, the particular quality of a man who had just realized the ground was not as solid as he'd thought. He mentioned lawyers. He mentioned destroying this family. He mentioned that Marcus had a baby on the way. I hadn't known that. And for a moment, that landed somewhere real. And then he said, don't you care about anyone but yourself? And I exhaled and moved to the next message. The last voicemail, left at 12:30 Sunday morning, was quiet. He sounded tired. He said, Claire, Just call me. Please. I called Dana instead. She and I had discussed the range of options. At one end, full dissolution, force a buyout, liquidate my stake, walk away clean with whatever my 60% was worth, which was, after the equipment loans were settled, not a transformative amount, but not nothing either. At the other end, full control, invoke my majority interest formally, restructure the business under my management, and give my family the opportunity to continue working in it under a proper formal agreement with real accountability. There was a third option, and it was the one I'd been turning over in my mind since the moment I'd read that LLC agreement at my kitchen table. I called my father back on Sunday afternoon. He picked up before the second ring. Claire. His voice was different from the voicemails. Smaller. Dad. I just want to understand what you're trying to accomplish here. He had worked hard to make it sound like a reasonable question rather than a challenge, and I gave him credit for the effort. I'm trying to be treated like what I actually am, I said. A co-owner, not an ATM you call when the numbers don't work. That's not fair. The business financials aren't fair, Dad. I said it calmly, the way Dana had coached me, factual, not emotional. I've seen them. I know what's been going through the accounts for 3 years. A long silence. That was Marcus's. It was in my name, I said. Anything connected to that LLC is connected to my name. That's the thing about being listed as the majority member. I paused. I need you to understand that I am not angry. I am just done pretending I was never here. He didn't say anything. I have a proposal, I said. I'm not going to dissolve the business. I'm not going to go to the IRS. I'm not going to pursue Marcus for the discrepancies, as long as they're repaid into the business account over 12 months and properly documented. I let that sit for a moment. What I am going to do is restructure the LLC properly. Formal agreement, quarterly financial reviews. My attorney involved in any decision over $5,000. And my name treated like what it is, the name that made this business possible. My father was quiet for so long that I thought the call had dropped. Then he said, and if we don't agree? Then I invoke majority control, and we go through the courts, I said. And everything I just described becomes public record. Another long silence. I looked out my window at the street. It was a gray Sunday, the kind that usually made me feel vaguely melancholy. It didn't today. I need to talk to your mother, he said finally. I know, I said. Take your time. We didn't speak for 10 days. I went to work. I called Dana twice. I slept well, which surprised me. The silence from my family had always felt like punishment before, like the cold shoulder was a consequence, and I was supposed to feel it and adjust my behavior accordingly. This silence felt different. It felt like space. On the 11th day, my mother called. No preamble, no wounding softness. She just said, "Your father wants to meet." We met at a coffee shop, neutral ground, the 4 of us. My father looked older than I remembered. Marcus came in and sat down without making eye contact for the first 3 minutes, which I chose to interpret as a form of remorse, or at least discomfort, which was close enough. The conversation was not warm. It was not what I would have called an apology, not from any of them. But it was something. My father said, with visible effort, "We should have handled this differently." My mother said she hadn't realized how much weight I'd been carrying. Marcus said he'd talked to his own accountant and was prepared to put together a repayment schedule. I listened. I nodded. I did not cry. And then I told them what the new structure would look like. I told them I would be stepping back from the financial paperwork. They could refinance the equipment loans in my father's name now that the business had 8 years of revenue history and a real balance sheet. I told them the LLC would be restructured with proper legal representation and a clear operating agreement. I told them Marcus could continue as the day-to-day manager, but any major decisions required my sign-off because 60% was 60%, and that was not going to change until someone bought me out at fair market value. And then I told them what I was going to do with my stake. There was a nonprofit I'd been involved with through my hospital work, a small organization that helped first-generation women start small food businesses, the kind of women who had good ideas and bad credit and no one to co-sign for them. I had been on their advisory board for 2 years, and I knew exactly what a little bit of leverage could do for someone who had never had anyone believe in them on paper. I told my family I was going to formally donate a portion of my LLC stake's annual returns to that organization. I would be a named supporter. The bakery would participate in their mentorship program, My Father's Skills, offered to women learning to run food businesses of their own. My father looked at me for a long time. Something moved across his face that I hadn't seen before, not pride exactly, but the first cousin of it. Recognition. You thought all of this through, he said. It wasn't quite an accusation. I've had 8 years of practice, I said. There was no dramatic reconciliation. No tearful group hug. My mother squeezed my hand when we said goodbye, and it was the most real thing she'd given me in years. My father shook my hand at the door of the coffee shop and held it a beat longer than necessary. Marcus said, "I'm sorry," clear into the middle distance, and I said I know and meant it. I drove home in the late afternoon light and sat in my car in my parking garage for a while before going upstairs. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular, just sitting with the quiet. The restructuring took 3 months to finalize. Dana was thorough. The new operating agreement was 42 pages long and said exactly what everyone's role was, exactly what required my approval, exactly how disputes would be handled. My father signed it with a pen I'd given him years ago as a birthday gift. I noticed that, and I let myself notice it. The first mentorship cohort we hosted at the bakery was 6 women. 3 were immigrants. 2 were coming out of periods of financial hardship. 1 reminded me a little of myself at 22, careful, capable, quietly burning to build something, unsure if anyone would hand her the tools. I stood in the back of the room that first Saturday morning and watched my father show them how to score a loaf before baking, how to tell by sound when the crust was right, how to trust your hands to know things before your brain does. He was good at it. He'd always been good at it. That had never been the problem. Afterward, he found me by the door. "This was a good idea," he said. "Yes," I said. He nodded. He started to say something else and then seemed to decide against it. That was fine. I had stopped needing the words as much as I used to. Sometimes the action is the whole sentence, and you just have to learn to read it. I still have my apartment across town. My own career, my own life, my own Sunday mornings. I don't go to the bakery every week, maybe once a month, sometimes less. The business no longer runs through my personal credit. The accounts are clean. The repayment schedule is on track. What I don't have anymore is the particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being needed and invisible at the same time. That specific weight of doing everything and being seen as nothing. I set it down somewhere in the middle of all of this, and I have not picked it back up. When people hear this story and ask if I regret not walking away completely, I think about that room full of women learning to trust their hands. I think about what it cost me to build something without ever being told it was mine. And then, I think about what it would have cost me to leave it all behind. Some things, you don't walk away from. You just learn to walk through them differently. With your name on the door. With your 60% in writing. With your own attorney's number saved in your phone and the quiet, settled knowledge that patience is not the same thing as surrender. It never was.